It has been 52 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Arizona home, and tonight the desert air feels heavier than ever. We are tracking a massive escalation in the search as multiple agencies converge in a high-stakes aerial operation that has everyone asking, what did they find near the border? As Savannah Guthrie and her siblings issue a heart-wrenching new plea, the investigation is shifting toward evidence that authorities previously tried to downplay. From mysterious lights caught on camera to analyze tracks in the gravel, the window to find Nancy is closing, but the intensity of the hunt is only ramping up. Before we dive into these exclusive updates and the tactical movements of the FBI, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for the Mitchell Report so you never miss a development in the cases that matter most to our community. The visual of a single helicopter over the Tucson desert is a common sight, but what residents witnessed over the last 24 hours was something entirely different. Sources confirm that Pima County Sheriff's Department helicopters didn't just take to the skies for a routine patrol. They embarked on a specific, coordinated flight path that took them directly toward the Mexican border. This wasn't a solo mission for long. Soon they were joined by Maricopa County assets, creating a multi-agency aerial caravan that signaled a massive shift in the search for Nancy Guthrie. This isn't just about looking anymore. This looks like a mission with a destination. Investigators watched as these birds flew a very distinct corridor between Tucson and the southern border before banking hard and heading north toward Phoenix. But they didn't land at a municipal airport or a sheriff's outpost. They touched down directly at the FBI regional headquarters in Phoenix. Now, why does that matter? Because the FBI is where the high-level forensic processing happens. If Pima County found something in that rugged brush near the border, something small, something physical, or something digital, the fastest and most secure way to get it into the hands of federal analysts is by air. There is significant debate among experts about whether this was a movement of evidence or a movement of personnel. Some analysts suggest that because the flight path included a rendezvous near the border before heading to the FBI, it's unlikely to be a simple Uber ride for detectives. You don't take a helicopter to the Mexican border just to drop someone off at a desk in Phoenix. It suggests an aerial survey, perhaps using LiDAR mapping or advanced imaging to trace a path that a vehicle might have taken. If investigators have a breadcrumb leading south, they aren't just following it on the ground. They are mapping the escape route from a bird's eye view. The fact that Maricopa County was called in to assist adds another layer of urgency. Generally, you bring in a neighboring county's air support when your own resources are stretched thin or when you need a specific type of sensory equipment that the other agency possesses, whether they were looking for a fresh track in the sand or transporting a critical piece of evidence recovered from a remote hideout. The destination, the FBI headquarters, tells us exactly who is running the show behind the scenes. The tip of the spear is no longer just local police. It is a federalized hunt for a woman whose disappearance has stumped the nation for nearly 2 months. While the helicopters were buzzing overhead, the Guthrie family broke their silence with a statement that felt less like a press release and more like a desperate SOS to the people of Tucson. Savannah Guthrie, alongside her brother and sister, isn't just asking for prayers anymore. They are asking for data. They are asking neighbors to go back into their own digital lives, their texts, their journals, and their home security footage, and look at 3 very specific dates. These dates are January 11th, January 31st, and February 1st. Now, if you've been following this case closely, those dates should set off alarm bells. Sheriff Chris Nanos has recently tried to walk back the significance of January 11th, suggesting that perhaps the Porch guy wasn't there that night, or that the witness, Mr. Lemieux, might be mistaken. But the family statement tells a different story. They are doubling down on January 11th. This suggests that the FBI, who we know has been working closely with the family on their public messaging, still views that date as a critical rehearsal or scouting event by the perpetrators. The wording of the plea is haunting. They said, "We cannot grieve, we can only ache and wonder." This highlights the psychological torture of a missing person case versus a confirmed tragedy. For the Guthries, there is no closure, only a static state of pain. By specifically mentioning journal notes and conversations that in retrospect may hold significance, they are tapping into the idea that the kidnapper might be someone within the community's peripheral vision, someone who acted strange on those dates, someone who skipped work, or someone who suddenly had a vehicle they didn't have before. There is also a theory that this statement is a reaction to the blackout of information from law enforcement. As the official press conferences have dried up, the family is forced to become their own investigators and their own PR firm. They are begging the public not to let Nancy's face fade into the background. They believe the key isn't held by a detective in a suit, but by a neighbor who might have seen a car parked where it didn't belong on a cold January night. The mention of January 11th is a direct challenge to the idea that this case is cold. To the family, the trail is still burning, and they believe the evidence is sitting on someone's hard drive right now, waiting to be discovered. One of the most controversial pieces of evidence in this entire mystery involves what's happening in the background of the now famous Porch Guy video. If you look closely over the suspect's shoulder, there are lights. For weeks, people dismissed them as random reflections or distant streetlights, but new analysis suggests they might be the literal North Star of this investigation. We now know that in the direct line of sight from Nancy's porch, there is a vacant home and a construction site located in a cul-de-sac just up the street. The question is simple but massive. Are those lights coming from a getaway vehicle? When you watch the footage, the suspect glances back toward those lights several times. It's a classic check-in move. In the world of tactical surveillance, you don't look back at a stationary streetlight, you look back at your lookout or your driver. Analysts have noted that the lights appear to be at an angle and height that matches the elevation of that construction site. If a vehicle was parked there, idling with its lights on, it would provide the perfect vantage point to watch the street while the porch guy did the dirty work at the front door. But there's a catch. Some experts argue these could be solar-powered construction lights or even security lighting from the vacant property. However, the timing is too perfect. If those lights coincide with the exact moments of the abduction, the coincidence disappears. We have to ask why the construction site wasn't the first place cordoned off with yellow tape. If those lights were a car, then there is a second subject, a driver in a vehicle that was likely caught on other cameras entering or leaving that specific cul-de-sac. Digital cybercrime experts are now being called upon to enhance that grain of light. They are looking for lens flare patterns that could identify the specific make and model of a headlamp. It's the kind of high-level forensic work that happens at the FBI headquarters in Phoenix, the very place those helicopters were headed. If the porch guy wasn't a lone wolf, then the entire theory of the case changes. It moves from a random act of a predator to a coordinated hit involving multiple people, a getaway driver, and a pre-planned route that likely led straight to the border. The physical evidence left behind in the gravel of the Guthrie driveway is perhaps the most haunting piece of this puzzle, and it is finally getting the forensic scrutiny it deserves. We are looking at high-resolution images of tracks that don't belong to a standard car or truck. These are bilinear tracks, two parallel lines etched into the Tucson dirt that suggest a very specific type of conveyance was used to move Nancy from her front door to a waiting vehicle. Death investigators with decades of experience are pointing to the wheelbase and the curvilinear pattern, which shows a distinct radius as the object turned. There has been a lot of chatter online about whether these are simple trash can tracks, but the depth of the tread tells a different story. To leave a mark that deep in packed desert gravel, the object had to be carrying significant weight. If Nancy was incapacitated, the perpetrator likely realized they couldn't carry her to the street without being seen or leaving a massive biological trail. Using a conveyance, whether it was a wheelchair, a heavy-duty dolly, or a specialized cart, changes the entire profile of the suspect. It suggests a level of premeditation that goes far beyond a crime of opportunity. What's even more disturbing is the placement of these tracks. Analysis shows that the blood trail discovered by investigators seems to terminate at the exact point where the conveyance tracks began. If that's true, it means Nancy was bleeding, perhaps from a struggle or a fall, before being loaded onto this device. This isn't just about moving a person. It's about moving a person as fast as possible to minimize the exposure window for the perpetrator. The question is, where did this conveyance come from? Did the suspect bring it with them in a van, or did they find it on the property? The FBI and local investigators have to determine if a specialized piece of equipment, like a medical-grade wheelchair or a specific brand of construction dolly, was used. If it was, the tip of the spear becomes a forensic search for a piece of equipment. If a suspect bought a heavy-duty cart in the Tucson area in the days leading up to January 31st, it could be the digital paper trail that finally breaks this case open. But there is a dark side to this. If the sheriff's office truly dismissed these tracks as of no consequence early on, as some reports suggest, they may have let the wind and the desert weather erase the very thing that could have solved the mystery. As we look at the possibility of a second subject or a coordinated group, we have to talk about a previous crime that happened just 10 minutes away from Nancy Guthrie's home. Back in September, the Catalina foothills area was rocked by a sophisticated armed robbery that feels like it was ripped from the same playbook. A woman dressed in a tactical Amazon delivery outfit approached a home claiming she had a package. When the homeowners didn't bite, she left. But she came back 2 weeks later, this time with a team and a van. This isn't your typical smash and grab. This was a scout and strike operation. The similarities are jarring. The use of a female decoy to probe security, the patience to wait for weeks between scouting and striking, and the target, a high-end home in the very same neighborhood where Nancy was taken. In that robbery, the perpetrators were cold-blooded enough to pepper spray a small dog while they emptied a safe and stole jewelry. They were organized, they were armed, and most importantly, 3 of them are still on the loose. Could these 3 individuals be the team that took Nancy? The timeline fits. If they were active in the foothills in late 2025, they would still be operating in the area in early 2026. The MO of using a porch guy or a decoy to engage at the front door while others wait in a getaway vehicle matches the lights we saw in the background of the Guthrie video. It creates a terrifying reality for Tucson residents. There may be a professional crew of home invaders that has escalated from simple robbery to high-stakes kidnapping. But there are also major differences. The September robbery was about property, safes, and jewelry. The Guthrie case is about a person. Why would a robbery crew transition to kidnapping? Is it for a ransom that hasn't been made public? Or did something go horribly wrong during a standard home invasion, leading them to take Nancy to keep her from testifying? If 3 members of that foothills crew are still walking the streets of Tucson, they represent a massive hole in the local safety net. Investigators have to be asking if the porch guy is the missing link between a string of robberies and the most high-profile missing person case in Arizona history. At the center of this storm is Savannah Guthrie, a woman the nation knows as a professional, a mother, and a journalist. But for the last 52 days, she has been a daughter, living in a nightmare that no one should have to endure. When we watch her on our screens, we see the polish. But if you look at the most recent statements, you see the ache she described. This isn't just a news story for her. It is a search for the woman who raised her, the woman whose life is now a series of dates and forensic data points. The emotional toll of this case is unfathomable. Imagine having to sit in front of a camera and beg a kidnapper to return our mother so you can finally have peace. There is a specific kind of vulnerability in those words. The family is offering everything, money, silence, whatever it takes, just to bring Nancy home. They have stated, "We will pay," a line that some believe was coached by the FBI to see if it would trigger a ransom demand from whoever is holding her. But as the days turn into weeks, that hope for a peaceful return is becoming harder to sustain. The community in Tucson has rallied around the Guthries, but that support is a double-edged sword. Every time a neighbor posts a new theory or a grainy photo on social media, the family has to relive the trauma of the night she disappeared. They are living in a state of unresolved grief. You can't have a funeral for someone who is still out there. You can't move on when you don't know if she's cold, if she's hungry, or if she's even still in the country. The heart-wrenching pleas aren't just for the public. They are a direct message to Nancy, wherever she is, telling her that they haven't stopped fighting for her. This is where the human cost of the investigation becomes real. While the sheriffs argue over cold cases and procedure, a family is sitting at a kitchen table that has one empty chair. They are looking at the same January 11th footage over and over, trying to find a detail they missed. They are the ones who have to wake up every morning and realize that the nightmare didn't end when they opened their eyes. This isn't just a case in a file folder. It is the life of a beloved grandmother, a mother, and a neighbor whose absence has left a hole in the heart of the Arizona desert. The debate over the cold case label has become a flashpoint between the Guthrie family and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Chris Nanos has been accused of walking back the intensity of the search, leading many to fear that the resources are being diverted elsewhere. But let's be clear, by definition, this is not a cold case. A cold case is one where all leads have been exhausted and there is no active investigative movement. With helicopters flying to the FBI and the discovery of new tracks in the driveway, this is a hot investigation. So why is there a perception that it's cooling down? Part of it is the silence. The blackout of information from the authorities can feel like abandonment to a family in crisis. When the sheriff says, "We aren't sure about January 11th anymore," it feels like a slap in the face to the witnesses who risk their safety to come forward. It creates a vacuum that is being filled by online sleuths and private investigators who are often finding things the police missed. This information gap is where the frustration lives. Experts like Joseph Scott Morgan, who has handled over 10,000 death investigations, are warning that we shouldn't confuse deliberate silence with inactivity. The FBI doesn't just decamp back to Phoenix because they've given up. They move to the headquarters to process the massive amounts of data they've collected, the cell tower pings, the Bluetooth sniffer results, and the aerial imagery. The investigation hasn't stopped. It has moved into the lab phase. But for a family waiting for news, the lab phase feels like an eternity. There is still life in this case. There is still a possibility of a conclusion that isn't a tragedy. Whether it's a break in the Porch guy identification or a ping from a device near the Mexican border, the data is still being gleaned. The Guthries aren't letting the sheriff off the hook, and the public isn't letting the story die. As long as there are questions about those helicopters and those lights in the distance, the case remains as urgent as it was on day one. The ache that Savannah described is what's keeping the search alive, even when the official press conferences go quiet. As this investigation hits the 52-day mark, the spotlight is shifting back to the very last moments Nancy was seen and the digital trail that suddenly went dark. We know Nancy was dropped off by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, around 9:50 p.m. on January 31st. But it's what happened in the dead of night that has the FBI's elite cyber units working overtime. At exactly 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, her Nest doorbell camera was manually disconnected by a masked and gloved individual. Then, 25 minutes later, the system detected a person moving again. That gap, that 25-minute window of silence, is where investigators believe the heart of the crime lies. This was no random act. A common burglar doesn't bring a backpack, gloves, and the technical knowledge to disable a high-end security system before even stepping inside. Forensic experts are calling this a targeted, organized abduction, requiring reconnaissance and clearly defined roles. Think about the logistics. The perpetrator knew where the cameras were. They knew the layout of the Catalina Foothills property, and they knew Nancy would be alone. It points toward the January 11th scouting theory that Savannah and her family have been begging us to look into. If someone was watching the house 3 weeks prior, they weren't just looking for a way in. They were timing the arrival and departure of family members. Adding to the mystery is a chilling video from inside the Uber Nancy took earlier that evening. While the driver has been cleared and the footage reportedly shows a regular drop-off, the FBI is scrutinizing her demeanor and every word she said during that ride. Was she being followed even then? Did she mention a strange man or a vehicle she didn't recognize? While the public hasn't seen this footage, sources say it is being compared to thousands of hours of other neighborhood surveillance to see if a specific tail vehicle appears in the background. The search has now moved from the physical brush of the desert to the microscopic world of forensic genetic genealogy. Sheriff Chris Nanos recently dropped a bombshell. Investigators have recovered DNA from bloodstains found near the entrance of Nancy's home. While we know some of that DNA belongs to Nancy herself, there is a second, workable profile that authorities are currently processing. This is the silent witness that the kidnapper left behind. A single hair, a drop of sweat, or a skin cell caught on the very camera they tried to disable. By using the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer, the FBI is scouring public ancestry databases to find a familial match for the suspect. This explains the recent aerial bridge to the FBI headquarters in Phoenix. They aren't just moving people, they are moving forensic samples to the highest level labs in the country. If the Porch guy has a cousin, a sibling, or a distant relative who has ever taken a DNA test, his anonymity is over. This is the breakthrough Nanos hinted at when he said the case is not even close to being cold. But as the science moves forward, the reality on the ground is getting darker. The Guthrie family's latest statement included a line that sent a shiver through the Tucson community. We want to celebrate her beautiful and courageous life, but we cannot do that until she is brought to a final place of rest. For the first time, the family is publicly acknowledging the possibility that Nancy may no longer be alive. Criminologists note that in high-profile abductions, the lack of a proof of life after 50 days is a grave indicator. The transition from finding her to bringing her home for rest suggests that even the people who love her most are bracing for a tragic conclusion. The investigation is also fighting a second war, a war against misinformation and scams. In the vacuum of official updates, fraudulent GoFundMe pages and imposter ransom demands have begun to surface. The FBI actually made an arrest in February of a man named Derek Colella, who allegedly tried to capitalize on the family's pain with a fake demand for money. It's a sickening reminder of how a high-profile tragedy can attract the worst elements of society. Sheriff Nanos has had to issue urgent warnings, telling the public that all official efforts are funded through proper channels and that any private fundraising is a scam. This chaos is putting immense pressure on local leadership. There are growing reports that Sheriff Chris Nanos is facing internal and public scrutiny over his handling of the case, from his initial dismissal of key evidence to his decision to attend a basketball game just days after Nancy vanished. While he defends his actions as needing a break due to personal family losses, the perception of a stalled investigation is hard to shake. The community wants results, and the $1.2 million reward, the largest in Arizona history, is a testament to the fact that someone out there knows the truth and just hasn't felt safe enough to speak up yet. As we wait for the DNA results to come back from the lab, the focus remains on the human cost of this 52-day vigil. Savannah Guthrie remains away from the Today show desk, choosing to stay in the trenches with her family. Her colleagues like Hoda Kotb have stepped in, but the energy in that New York studio won't be the same until Nancy is found. The case of Nancy Guthrie isn't just a Tucson mystery, it is a national heartache that won't be resolved until the Porch guy is unmasked and the question of those desert helicopters is finally answered. As the investigation enters its 8th week, a chilling new theory is emerging from the highest levels of former law enforcement. Rick Castigar, who once served as the second-in-command at the Pima County Sheriff's Department, has gone on record with a grim assessment that contradicts the official rescue mission narrative. Castigar suggests that Nancy Guthrie may have passed away shortly after her abduction due to the severe medical complications she faced. At 84 years old, Nancy required daily medication for high blood pressure and cardiac issues, medication that was left sitting on her kitchen counter the night she was taken. This theory posits that the kidnappers' original plan was to use Nancy as a high-stakes bargaining chip for money, but that her fragile health negated their opportunity. If the perpetrators took her toward the Mexican border, as the recent helicopter movements suggest, the physical toll of that journey may have been too much for her heart to handle. Castigar believes this is why the ransom notes, which Harvey Levin of TMZ reported receiving in the early days, suddenly stopped. If the commodity the kidnappers were holding is no longer alive, they have nothing left to bargain with, and their only focus now is staying hidden. This perspective adds a heavy context to the Guthrie family's change in language. In their most recent plea, they didn't just ask for her return. They spoke of bringing her to a final place of rest. It's a subtle but profound shift. For the people of Tucson, this theory is a wake-up call. Sheriff Chris Nanos has warned that if this was a targeted hit by professional criminals, they absolutely could strike again. He's urging residents not to feel safe just because they aren't the Guthries. The desert is vast, the border is close, and if Nancy was lost due to a medical crisis mid-abduction, the evidence of her whereabouts may be buried in a place only her captors can find. The technical battle to identify the Porch guy has reached a critical juncture with the introduction of forensic investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. This is the same genetic fingerprinting that solved the Golden State Killer case and led to the arrest of Brian Kohberger in the Idaho student murders. Investigators are no longer just looking for a match in CODIS, the national database of known offenders. They are now uploading the workable DNA profile found near the bloodstains at Nancy's home to public ancestry sites, building family trees out of distant cousins to find a common ancestor. However, this path is fraught with complications. Sources close to the lab in Florida say the DNA sample recovered is low-level and mixed, meaning the suspect's genetic material is intertwined with Nancy's and possibly other family members. If the ratio isn't high enough, the genealogy software can't distinguish the perpetrator's branch from the noise. This explains the immense $1.2 million reward, the highest in Arizona history. Law enforcement knows that science has its limits, and they are hoping a massive payout will convince someone in the suspect's inner circle to flip. While the labs work, the Pima County Sheriff's Department is also sifting through tens of thousands of tips and digital evidence. They have recovered a pair of pajamas near the home and a glove found 2 miles away that bears a striking resemblance to the one worn by the masked man in the video. Although the glove was initially traced back to a local worker, the sheer volume of leads is staggering. The FBI's role has been to provide the technical muscle, the signal sniffers for her pacemaker, and the advanced video enhancement. But even with 400 personnel and volunteers on the case, the man in the mask remains a ghost. Tonight, as the yellow ribbons of hope continue to spread across Tucson, the mission remains clear: bring Nancy Guthrie home. Whether this ends in a miraculous rescue or a somber recovery, the resolution lies in the hands of the community. Savannah Guthrie's absence from the Today show desk is a daily reminder that for this family, time stopped on February 1st. They are stuck in a state of unresolved grief, caught between the memories of January 11th and the terrifying reality of what comes next. We have covered the aerial movements, the DNA struggles, and the heartbreaking words of a daughter who just wants her mother back. You now have the most complete picture of where this case stands. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CAL-FBI or use the anonymous tip line at 520-88-CRIME. Your detail could be the key that finally unmasks the Porch guy and brings justice to the Guthrie family. If this breakdown helped you understand the stakes of this case, please share this video so Nancy's face stays in the public eye. Like this video to help it reach more people in Arizona, and subscribe to the Mitchell Report to stay updated on the latest developments. We won't stop following this until Nancy is home. I am Michelle. This is the Mitchell Report. Thank you for watching.